It's Car Con Carne live from Quarantine Con Carne. I'm James Van Ostel, and the show today is sponsored by our friends at C&H Financial Services. As business owners open back up to serve their communities, they're faced with a lot of challenges as they navigate through this new normal brought on by the coronavirus. C&H Financial Services is here to help. They offer a variety of products, ranging from traditional merchant accounts to a zero-cost payment processing solution, which eliminates the expense associated with accepting Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express as a form of customer payment. To learn more, contact C&H Financial Services at 855-600-2437 or go to chfs.us. A quick programming note here on Car Con Carne. Coming up the next 2 weeks, well, Monday is National Scotch Day, God bless it. So Kevin Canchola from Glenfiddich will be joining us. Also on the way, he's a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. He's an author. He's a talking head. Chris France will be on the show. And then next week, we're talking to documentary filmmaker Steve Karras. We're going to talk about his movie About Face, the story of Jewish refugee soldiers of World War II. It is gut-wrenching, powerful stuff. We'll talk to him. And as we continue to live life in this dystopia, it's good to know that it's okay to not be okay. We'll check back in with our friends at the Hope for the Day charity. But for now, I am thrilled to present today's show. I have with us today Alok Mishra, the producer, Naomi Grossman, who plays Janice in the fabulous new movie One Bedroom. Thank you for joining us. Lovely to see you both.
Thank you for having us.
So for those who haven't seen it yet, and I'm going to strongly recommend this. I'm always looking for good horror movies. This is it, One Bedroom. It's a tale of isolation, not knowing who you are, where you fit in. If that isn't emblematic of life in a quarantine, I don't know what is. This is great stuff. It's available video on demand. I watched it on Amazon Prime. I'm always looking for stuff. And I was telling you both before we started, I found this by accident. Like I was just scrolling through Amazon. I do that death scroll where I'm just looking through the screen, trying to find something to land on. I'm like, oh, what's this? 1BR. And I read the description. I'm like, that's it. I love this movie. Congratulations on the work you both did.
Yay.
Thank you.
So,
It's really a testament to our writer director, David Marmor, that it actually, it turned out as well as it did. He's amazing.
well, thank God he
Alok, you deserve a lot of credit as well. There were some major obstacles in making this movie and you weathered them. So,
and I want to cover all those obstacles because this was almost a cursed existence trying to put this together for you guys. You had a lot of challenges along the way. But like you mentioned, David Marmor, I am so glad that he had struggles with alienation and making his way through Los Angeles because it really lent itself to a great story.
He wrote it. I think he had just come down from like the Bay Area and came to Los Angeles, and he was going to do a graduate program at USC for directing. And I think that he felt like what you feel when you move to a big city, which is then you don't have friends and you don't have sort of like that pack yet, and you feel sort of very alienated, and you're walking around these buildings. The building that we actually got is very much like what I've been told what he had, when he first came to LA, where there's big breezeways and a pool and people that are waving to you, and you're like, who the fuck are you? Why are you smiling at me? Like that kind of stuff going on. And you have shared walls, and it's a weird experience, being on your own and finding your way. And so I think that a lot of that sort of weird stuff went on with him. In addition to that, I don't think I'm spoiling anything because it's in the trailer, but he also had a cat that was not allowed, that he was keeping inside and hoping that no one would find out, or the cat would, he'd open the door and the cat would just run out onto the breezeway or something, and he'd be caught and instantly shamed and maybe kicked out of the place. And so he had a lot of that worry going on that our main character, Sarah, had going on in the story too. So it really was like a kind of almost a true to life thing in terms of the inspiration for David.
Well, and Alok is from LA, so he doesn't actually know what it's like to move here. But I was very fortunate that when I did move to LA from Chicago, in fact, I know you are in Chicago, and I went to Northwestern, go Cats. But it turns out that one of our mutual friends who I went to college with, Alok went to high school with, introduced us. And so Alok made my entry into LA that much more, truly seamless, or else I'd probably be Sarah myself, let me tell you.
So a little bit of back.
It's a weird place to move to. It's so big and yet feels so, isolating and lonely at first.
Oh, I have no doubt of that. And to backtrack a little bit for people who may be just joining and listening, who don't know what the movie is all about, you mentioned the lead character, Sarah. She's ditched her family. She's pursuing a career. She's striking out on her own. She wants to be a fashion designer. She finds this apartment. She shows up in this complex. Everyone is really friendly. They're hanging out. They're waving. They have get-togethers. It's a very social, communal sort of thing. Something that seems that idyllic, is going to break bad pretty quickly. And sure enough, in no time flat, the cat was really a turning point that you referenced earlier. It just, I'm trying to be careful and dance around spoilers, but I mean, you're right. The trailer does give some of it away. I mean, can I at this point, do I say possible light spoilers?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's in the trailer, you should just consider fair game in that regard. I mean, at some point, we might have to get into a little bit of spoilers. You did tell the audience that they should watch the movie. If they haven't watched the movie, maybe it's on them. But we'll try not to give away a lot away, obviously. But whatever's in the trailer seems fair game.
I mean, it's hard to dance around the reveal of the movie, but I feel like lots of reviews have already spoiled that. What's going on at the apartment?
Yeah.
Can I talk about this?
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is just let's not talk about maybe the ending for sure, the last third as much if we can help it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we have to reveal a little bit to have a conversation, right?
Yes. Okay. Fair. Thank you for absolving me from my future sins. So this community there's more than meets the eye with this community. It's really interesting. I want to watch it again. I'm looking forward to watching it again so I can see the characters, knowing how everything plays out. Like seeing how everything is threaded through the movie, seeing what Janice does early on and knowing where things are going. This is a community, and I think they're very righteous in the sense that they believe that they're doing the right things. It's a cult. And poor Sarah ends up in this apartment complex, which looks like a prison. That's no accident.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is we're a low budget film, a no budget film if you call it that, and we were struggling to find that apartment complex even a week until we were shooting. And when we've seen a couple places, we walked a lot of places actually, and we thought we had set up another place to shoot at, and then the last minute they were like, yeah, we want like $3,000 more, and we're like, we don't have it. You don't understand. We have no money. You are fucking us. And they're just like, yeah, well then fuck you. And we're like, well, fuck you. So can I curse on this, by the way?
It's a podcast, sure.
Okay.
It's live, Alok. It's too late.
Some people are sensitive. I've already cursed, I suppose. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't matter. Better to ask to give an apology rather than ask permission sometimes. But exactly. The point is this: we found the place, and David and I, when we were there together, we were doing this together. When we walked in the place, he's like, first off, it looks just like what I had back in the day. And secondly, I said, like, it looks very uniform and very almost prison-like, but cheery because it's sunshiny. Yeah. So I feel like, in some ways, we had talked about this, like the apartment complex was its own character, like really, in a sense, to the movie, right? And so when we found that place, and they were actually like slightly even cheaper than the last place we were supposed to get, we're like, it's kismet, it's fate, let's do it. And so, and here's the funny thing too. This is a functioning apartment complex, right? Like this whole thing is full of people, and they were so nice. It was crazy. And what's even weirder is that, like Naomi was talking about earlier on, I moved to the Valley after this was finished and stuff, and I live 2 miles away from that place now. It's right next to the veterinarian I take my dog to. So every time I take my dog, and I was cruise by and I was like, look out, take some pictures. My dream is actually to put up a nice poster and say, hey, listen, we want to do a screening for you guys after this COVID thing is over, and do it in the courtyard, because so many of the apartment complex people were so nice. Even some of them wanted to be extras. And we were like, free extra? Fuck yeah. So we got them to do that. And the only time it kind of sucked was that, sometimes people would put their dogs in the house and there'd just be a barking dog. And the whole thing about this movie, one big plot point is that there's no pets allowed.
Nope.
And so you'd hear this dog in the background, and I'd be like, can someone just go talk to those people and pay them $20, take the dog on a walk, go with them so they feel like we would have to do stuff like that, which was hilarious, right? And so, yeah, they were so nice, and it was very prison-like as far as the way it looked, very uniform, everyone's equal sort of looking sort of thing.
If
But
I
yet
lived
did
there,
have a
though,
nice
I
courtyard
wouldn't
and
want to
did
see
have
this
and
movie.
we
What's that, Naomi?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was
Yeah.
saying, like, I think that's a lovely offer, like a generous, like, they've gone to the trouble to like be an unpaid extra for us. But God, if I saw this movie, I'd like want to move.
Yeah.
Just saying, like, you might actually really ruin their living situation. So just think about that before off the screen.
I think that we can't. First off, I'd love to in a year do that, but I don't think that we get that opportunity, unfortunately, because I don't think the 1BR heat will maybe last. I hope it'll last longer than a year, but who knows if they're going to want to have something like that. But anyway, the point is this: it is what you say. It is very prison-like looking, a very uniform, and everyone doesn't. There's not a lot of individuality that goes around with how the look of that place is, and it was very much a character that kind of like fed into the story, if that makes sense.
Well, and you said the word individuality. I mean, that is a core struggle that Sarah has, expressing her individuality. She moved to the West Coast to kind of be her own person, but you see her in the workplace, and it's a struggle to assert herself and speak up. And you see systematically her individuality get broken down, or does it, as the movie unfolds. And it's going back to the prison thought, or how the building looks like a prison. You don't see a whole lot of the outside world. You see the complex, you see where she works. And that to me lent to the claustrophobia of the movie.
Yeah.
Certainly that was intentional.
Well, it's funny, like how it really fits into what we're living in now, really. Like, can you imagine being in an apartment in New York and just having to like just sit there and you lose your fucking mind? Like, and sort of that's sort of what happens, without giving too much away, in our story too, in terms of like sort of being stuck in a situation with people you may or may not know very well, and you're just there. And the only thing that is probably keeping you sane at this point is listening to podcasts like yours, or doing something to distract yourself. People are drinking more than they should. They're eating more than they should. My sister-in-law said by the end of this, we're all going to be alcoholics and diabetics. That's a fucking fact. Like, so, but going back to the actual 1BR story, that's sort of like very true to what's going on. And that apartment complex was really amazing to help kind of convey that energy and information, sort of, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. By the way, I love how DIY you are about everything, even handling the press the way you're doing it. You've all just rolled up your sleeves to make this a thing.
Well,
that's low budget or no budget filmmaking for you.
I love it.
When you have all the budget in the world, you can hire somebody to do that, and when you don't, you do it yourself.
I love it. American Horror Story, for instance.
Exactly what it is.
That runs itself. That's got a machine behind it. This, you got to roll up your sleeves a little bit.
There is somebody hired to literally like pull the freak show tent so that it looks windy. You know what I mean? Like, there's a job for that. In 1BR, if you watch that movie, when you watch it the next time, look for Alok. You'll find him. He's in there. He's an extra too.
This is why I want to watch it again.
Yeah, dude, our producers who are, they've got much bigger things to do other than just, stand and be like a warm body on the set. They're warm bodies too, because
it's funny. I didn't. This was my first movie, and I have a production company with my producing partner Shane Borrister called Malevolent Films. And we, our background was that we tested movies. We did market research for film for 18 years. So we tested movies for all the different studios and independents and whatever else. Like, I helped fight for Paranormal Activity. DreamWorks had bought it out of like Slam Dance, and they wanted to do a shot-for-shot remake of it. And they made me come in and watch it. And I was like, they wanted to do a shot-for-shot remake with like Matthew McConaughey and like Ashley Judd playing the leads. And I was like, this is so stupid. You need to like just show this movie. You need to change the end. The ending's terrible, but everything else is the whole interesting part of it is you don't know if it's real, and that's what's sort of interesting, lightning in a bottle for a movie like that. So I had that sort of background coming in and stuff, and I don't know. It was a thing where we wanted to make elevated horror. Elevated horror was sort of like the missive for our production company, and we, came across this script very luckily. I mean, it was like this. It's like my wife is friends. Went to high school with David's manager, Allard Cantor, and his partner, Jared Murray. They have a company called Epicenter. They're also producers on the film, actually. And that's kind of part of the interesting part of how it all came to be. So we had one of those like Los Angeles lunches where everyone comes together. My wife came too. And we just talk about, ourselves, and we talk about what we're working on. And I was like, he's like, well, and I was like, yeah, send me some stuff. I already had another movie in pre-production. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to really read it for a while. And 6 months later, the production I was working on fell apart right before I was going to shoot. And I was like, holy shit, I need to fucking find a movie. And so I started reading all the scripts. Allard had sent me 2 scripts. One of them was Tragedy Girls. If you've never seen that, excellent film. It's on Hulu. It's for free on Hulu or whatever, if you have a subscription there. You guys hear me? Sorry, it broke up a little bit. Did it? Are we okay?
We can hear you perfectly.
It breaks up whenever you swear, so maybe be aware of that.
That's it.
The Facebook police are behind it, are onto us, let's say. But Tragedy Girls is an amazing film, horror comedy. And from testing movies, I was like, it's always hard to do a horror comedy because people who want comedy think it's too horror based, and people who want horror don't think it's like enough horror going on. And so I told them, I was like, listen, I would never do that film. I can't imagine who would make it because it's hard to do it. And they were like, yeah, we just finished filming that a week ago. And I was like, what the fuck do I know? The other film was David's film, 1BR. And so we met at the Culver Hotel, had some coffee, same sensibility. And basically I was like, well, we're first-time producers and you're a first-time director. What could go wrong? And so much went wrong.
And I want to get to that too.
That's sort of the origin. That's sort of the origin story, if you want to know, in terms of like finding the material and also being able to, figure out we liked it because David is so smart. The script is actually even better than what was on the screen because we actually had to pare it down a bit to be able to afford to shoot it, actually. That was a big thing. So
if you're just joining us on Facebook right now, we're talking about the movie 1BR. Alok Mishra is the producer. Naomi Grossman plays Janice in the movie. Love this movie to death. And we're talking about the creation of it, what's behind it. You mentioned the term elevated horror, and it's interesting. I have a hard time describing what it is I like about movies like 1BR, but I guess the best way I can describe it is it walks the line of plausibility until it doesn't. These are real people until things just go batshit crazy. I like, as opposed to supernatural stuff, as opposed to some other horror type tropes, I like when people just, you see the horror inherent in everyday human beings. I don't know what the genre is. Is it elevated horror? I don't know, but it's stuff like this that just, I can't get enough of.
Well, I mean, I like to think of it as thinking man's horror movies, right? Like you do think about if this is possible. People always put themselves in the position of what if this happened to me? How could I get past this? Would I be able to escape? They don't think about these things. And we try to make everything believable enough and character-based enough that you kind of go on this journey with us through Sarah. And it's sort of a thing where people always say they get a lot more out of it than they thought they were going to get. There are a lot more twists and turns that are actually believable, sort of twists and turns that occur in the film. It starts off a little slow, like a slow burn, but then, by the time you get into the end game, it is just, you are there with the characters. You are hopefully like sitting on the edge of your seat. You are like cheering, hopefully, at the right part when, people make get theirs, let's say, and different things like this, without spoiling it too much. But it does, in terms of elevated horror, we thought of movies like The Witch, for example, and we're like, holy shit, it's an old English fucking movie that somehow was able to do phenomenal business. They did cut a good trailer together. Their cinema scores weren't so good, sadly, because people saw it was on old English. They were like, "Fuck this movie," you know. But horror fans who are, you know, really genuinely thinking people, a lot of them all love that movie, for example.
Yeah.
And for 1BR, we found our movie in a certain way is a nice, like you discovered it, right? You discovered it and then once you discovered it, you were sort of surprised and happily surprised, let's call it, right? And I feel like there's almost a subgenre of that is like the discovery, right? And when people do discover it, it's so funny how passionate they get about it. But the great thing about this in certain ways is the word of mouth, right?
Oh, yeah.
We used to have this score when we tested movies. There's 2 scores that mattered. How would you score the film? Excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. And then would you definitely recommend it? Now that definitely recommend score is so crucial because if you tell your friend to see this movie, it is better than any trailer I could pay to cut. You know, you telling your friend will move the dial, right? And so I think that's what this movie has going for it too, is that it's a discovery thing and people are passionate about discovery. They want to spread the word a lot of times, especially horror fans. I mean, you think about the horror genre, I'm sorry, I'm going a little tangents here, but like Naomi Grossman goes to all these conventions, right? There's no other genre that has 250 conventions worldwide annually. There's no fucking comedy convention like that, like has this many conventions. It's like these horror fans are hardcore, passionate, and really it's a cottage industry, and it's because horror is its own thing. It's amazing, and our film hopefully is part of some sort of like early tradition of like, you know, discovery that will continue on, and maybe hopefully, if, you know, fingers crossed, have a sequel, because I think we've sort of built a world in an interesting way that people would like to see where it's going. We've also been a little bit, you know, close to the vest with where things could go in this first movie. So there is a bit of a faith that's needed to be involved with watching it and sort of understanding in that regard. But I think people love it because it's sort of a discovery in a certain way. I feel like I'm going off different tangents right now. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, you're saying all the right things, and that answered one of my questions.
My thought for that question.
Because certainly a sequel is one of the things that came to mind when I finished watching the movie. I want to talk about how Nicole came on board, but first I want to ask Naomi, what did you think when you first saw the script? Was this an easy decision to make? Did you hem and haw?
No, I mean, it's totally in tune with kind of what I do now. It's not what I always did. You know, prior to American Horror Story, I really fancied myself a comedian. And so, but you know, we don't always choose our paths. Sometimes they choose us. And, you know, I prior to Horror Story, I'd done sketch comedy at the Groundlings, and in fact before that in Chicago I did some of that late night comedy there, like Cannibal Cheerleaders on Crack and Shannon Doherty Shoots the Porno, and yeah, so so in that regard, this is a total departure. But at the same time, you know, comedy and horror, it's interesting. They both sort of lend themselves to really over the top characters. And that, I think that's what I really honed. I think, you know, I just figured it was, you know, I was going in the direction of SNL. As it turns out, I was going in the direction of VHS. Fine, whatever. Different acronym. I didn't choose it. It chose me, but not that I'm mad at it. But you know, the fact is, like, a lot of these horror you know, icons, say Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, I mean, these are like really, you know, big over the top characters, which could very well feed into comedy, but you know, they also feed into horror, certainly. So anyway, now it's my turn to go tangential, but I think, given, you know, once I sort of established myself in horror, yes, this is very much representative of the kind of material that I'm approached with, and I loved it, and I love Alok. We've been friends for many years, and so I'd always wanted, you know, we'd always wanted to work with each other, and so this seemed like kind of an obvious place to start. Oh, knowing, of course, that 2BR or 1 bedroom, 2 bathroom or whatever, we'll be seeing a little more of Janice.
I would hope so.
1BR,
Right?
the
I mean,
Chronicles, Janice is how
I mean,
am
they already got me for the reshoots. We shot, how many days did we shoot, Alok?
I'll say this. We shot 15 days initially. It was a crazy short shoot. And then we realized we didn't get everything we needed to make it very good. So we're talking scoring. And it was so funny because Naomi Grossman, I want to tell you this, but she was nominated for an Emmy, right? And like, it just so happened, we could have shot any time, but it was so tough to get the band back together because like Naomi is shooting like goddamn American Horror Story, like her 3rd season of it, right? And every time she's on, by the way, she is like IMDb's most looked up person in the world. I've seen like trophies at her house. Like, I mean, Naomi Grossman is the most looked up person in the world. Because a lot of times, like, she looks nothing like her Pepper character, and everyone's like, "That's the girl. I'm gonna forward this to my friend." And we've got 4 days to do reshoots in terms of getting the band back together. Like Taylor Nichols is incredibly difficult to get a hold of because that guy is working like crazy. Like he's on the show PN15. It's on Hulu, which is hilarious if you've never seen it.
And he's creepy. He's creepy as all get out in 1BR.
Oh, he's not even like me. Like, look, he's such a nice guy in real life. You're just like, how is this? You know? And he is amazing. But I actually, he was a friend of a friend. I accosted him at a party because I fucking love the movie Metropolitan and Barcelona, right? And I was like, Taylor Nichols, you are my favorite. I like that. This is my college movie. All of our friends are like downwardly mobile. I feel like we're nothing compared to what our parents were. And that Metropolitan movie was just that. I have a fucking Metropolitan poster in my house. And he was like, oh, that's
slowly backing up.
Yeah, exactly. And a year later, I call him up. I'm like, I'm the crazy Indian guy that's got the Metropolitan poster. I want you to be our cult leader. And he's like, oh, but he read the script and loved the script, so it all worked out.
But look, you got it off topic. You were on me.
Oh yeah. Sorry. So Naomi Grossman, Emmy nominee. We get the band back together.
Literally, there's 52 weeks in the year, and the only week that they can do these reshoots, which by the way, he says they needed because they, wanted to make a better movie, which I'm all for, and they did, and I'm happy. We did the right thing. But of course, he's like, we squandered your talent. We realize now we need to do reshoots so we can really explore Janice. Okay, whatever. I digress. The point is, they had to do it the weekend of the Emmys. So while I was released to go actually attend. Go ahead.
We did it the week. The Emmys were like on a Saturday or Sunday, I want to say.
Yeah.
And we shot the week before. Now, what's going on? Like, so the Oscars, the Emmys, they have all this great, like, cush, amazing stuff where they're like, oh, here's a gifting suite over here with trips to Barbados, and da-da. And so she came back and she's like, listen, Mishra, I'm coming back. This is bullshit. I can't go see that gifting suite and get da-da-da. Luckily for you, my mother is in town. I've sent her in my stead, and I will be ready for your close-up, Mr. DeMille, Mr. Mishra.
That's very good of you, Naomi.
You know what? I'll be honest. My mom did not go to the gifting suite.
But the point of it is she was so
I have not
lovely.
been to Barbados.
Her time to
now
shine,
that we're
like,
all under lockdown, I probably never will. So.
Well, I thought you told me you got some of that stuff. Anyway, the point of it is this: she was so gracious and so amazing to, like, in her time to shine that week, to go to parties and look gorgeous and do whatever else. She is like murdering people and crying, so she has boogers.
You know what? There'll be other chances. I have to believe that.
I want to believe that.
And thankfully you did, and thankfully it all kind of turned out in that regard. Hopefully, at least, I think it did. But anyway, she was so gracious is the point, and she did, like, in this week of weeks, sacrificing time to come back and do the reshoots. And one of the things we reshot, to be honest, was the ending, in which we actually shot 2 different endings. And the ending that we like, the producers like better, actually worked. Dave now likes the ending too, by the way. But in wearing his director hat and writer hat, the writer hat did not like our ending, like the other ending he shot. But finally we convinced him because we did some test screenings for it. Like I think maybe mentioning earlier. we did 5 small test screenings / focus groups of 20 people each, and it really helped direct a lot of things to go the right way.
All right, so let's jump around a little bit. You have your Sarah in the form of Nicole Bryden Bloom. I think she's pitch perfect. She's vulnerable. She conveys that lack of confidence. She seems like a perfect choice for the role. She was not the first person you had in that role. This is part of the mishaps and cursed existence of a DIY film. Can you tell that story, Alok, of how Nicole got the gig and how things kind of went off the rails before then?
100%. So what happened was that we had this like sort of famous TV actress who was like the lead of a show, and I cannot tell you who this is because of libel or whatever else. And why should we want to besmirch somebody who, like, you know, clearly made a bad decision? But the idea is that we had her, and then she made us hire her. Like, didn't make us, but told us, hey, listen, there's this guy over here. I think he'd be good for your male lead, and he's on some, you know, CW vampires show that I've never fucking watched, that's been canceled, you know, there since or whatever. And I was like, oh wait, I think David wants to jump in. Hold on, let me just try to figure this out real quick. But I'll tell the story. She made us hire him. I don't know if this is her boyfriend allegedly or something like this, but we hired him because he's on TV, he can act, he, you know, seemed like fine enough choice, looks pretty and everything else, and definitely had, like, you know, one of the stupid things you have to look at as a producer now is Instagram followers or some shit like this. And it's like, you know, oh, I have 1 million and she has 5 million, and this makes a difference now, because it sadly does. So we had these people, and then we were, you know, it was a Monday, we were shooting on a Thursday. This is, you know, our first movie, we're all freaked out. And as you do as a producer, many times you have to wear many hats, you know. We had this feminine energy drink that this young lady, or the actress, we had wanted, and we had made a deal with the feminine energy drink company to kind of show the product in the background or something. You know, they sent us like a truckload of this stuff, right? But it wasn't gonna get there for like until 3 days into shooting. And so I was like, we gotta go fucking get this stuff. And it's so high end that only like high end grocery stores would carry it. Like, we had to call around for it. And so we found the energy drink in this Gelson's, which is a nice like market in LA and Marina Del Rey. And they only had a case of it. And I was talking to the manager. I was like, can you just go look in the back and just see if there's another case? Because I feel like we need at least one more case. And he's like, I don't know if there is. I'm like, can you just check? And he's like, all right. But while he's checking, I got a call from her agent, and they're like, yeah, she's out. And I'm like, why? And they're like, no reason. She's just out. And we're like, we are ruined. Like, you know, it's like, I was gonna throw up right there in the market and stuff. And I don't have a sensitive stomach, but I was just like, money. We put a lot of our own money in this film. We just put it out there in that regard too. And it was a, you know, a life choice where, you know, I may or may not have mortgaged my house to like pay for my share of the movie. Let's put it right. Like, and this is all like swimming in my head, and like, you know, I have a baby.
And now you're in Marina Del Rey buying an energy drink. It's the
feminine energy drink. Feminine energy.
It makes it even worse.
Yeah, so I'm gonna like throw up in the spot, and then you know, her friend calls up. He's also out, and so we immediately go to the bar. I don't know, it's like noon, and we're like trying to drink and trying to figure this out and just like calming ourselves down. Then we get a call from our other character, the Miss Stanhope character, and I can't tell you who the actor was originally played by because it's just not nice. But her husband is collapsed, rushed to the hospital, is dead. And we're like, okay, well, she's out too. And this all happened in the span of a couple hours, and we're like, am I Job? Like, what's going on here? It's like, so we sit and we start thinking about it, and we basically
at this point you're so far in, like I mean, it's still full speed ahead. You just,
well, what can we do?
You're right. You're so deep in it. You've got to bully your way through this.
It's like a wedding is already planned.
Yeah.
You cannot get any money back from any of this stuff at this point. I mean, there's insurance, but like, I mean, how much is that going to cost if it covers it, you know? So we push the movie back a week to the next Monday, and we're trying to cast. And the truth of the matter is that we always wanted Nicole.
We're losing you, Alok. Should I tell this story?
Naomi, why don't you tell the story?
Okay, yeah.
She was David's first choice, and she was our first choice too. But like, given the allure of like Instagram bullshit like this, given the allure. Hello, you hear me?
I can hear you. The screen froze at like the worst possible time for you. It looked like you were being like eviscerated. Like it was a horrible freeze frame.
Well, in the meantime, I texted Dave to come on. So here's the thing. We moved everything back a week. Then what we did is we got Nicole. She was our first choice, but because of the allure of making money without having to even shoot a frame of film, that was the sort of our thing. And we knew the lady could act, and so we basically got Nicole to come out. She flew out from New York, which is interesting in a regard because she actually was sort of like the real character of Sarah, because she was coming in this place, fish out of water. So these things are kind of helping the performance, I think, in some ways that are real life things. So she gets to actually rehearse with David for like 3 hours, and then we're shooting on Monday. Now, let's fast forward to Friday before we shoot on Monday. We don't have our older lady character, and we don't have our male lead. I get a bunch of reels from people, and one of them is Susan Davis. Susan Davis was the mom on War Games. David's coming on too. And she is an amazing character actor. She's been on everything from the Rockford Files. She's Robert Altman's like cousin. He brought her out. Oh, Dave's here. And so she is amazing. And someone sent us her reel. A friend sent me her reel. And I watched her reel. There's a number at the end of it. I called the number. The who picks up the phone? I thought it was going to be her agent or a manager. It's her. And I'm like, all right, this is highly like inappropriate, but I'm gonna pitch you the movie and I'm gonna pitch you us. And at the end of it, she's like, well, I've never been in a cult movie before. I think this is interesting. And this is at 9 o'clock in the morning, 11:30, signed her. Then fast forward to that night, we're sitting in Barney's Beanery because we still don't have the male lead. And we're freaking the fuck out and drinking. And we're trying to tell friends like Jason Blum or whoever to like help us keep CAA open later to find us somebody. And his head of like post production is really good friends with us, and so he's doing all the monkey work and he's helping everyone stay open late. And finally, we get a call from Gersh, who was very helpful in the whole thing. They actually are also not only represent Giles Maddie, who plays Brian, but also they represent Nicole Bryden Bloom. So Rhonda Pierce and her team were really invaluable, and so they call us and they tell us, okay, you got your Brian, Giles Maddie is in. But what we found out later was the reason he hadn't called or hadn't figured stuff out yet was because he was driving down from San Francisco and he had to pull over the side of the road and look at the script on his phone and read it on his phone. And he just read his part and then said yes, which was hilarious. And so we all were like, we're making a movie. And let's see if everyone shows up on Monday. And it was amazing. Like I said, like David only rehearsed with Nicole for like 3 hours. She literally brought her like roll away bag like from the airport to come and meet with David to say hi, I think, for a coffee. And then they got to do 3 hours at what other point. But anyway, so that was the story of horrible.
I love this because I feel like
What, Naomi?
it's funny to me that Alok, like, it's like he's surprised, like, that an actor would only read their part. Like, of course, that's all they really care about. They want to make sure they're not in a porno. That's it. And the fact is,
or at least that they're not in the porno scene.
In the pages he read, so it must be okay. That's the mentality of the actor. But I can see why a producer or a director might be maybe more thoughtful about it.
This is a good time.
You guys give us way more credit than we're actually worth.
This is a good time to kind of do what we call a reset in broadcast and kind of acknowledge what we're doing here. We're talking about the new movie 1BR, which is a fantastic new elevated horror movie. I have with me, if you're just joining Facebook Live or if you just fast forward the audio file of the podcast, which would be weird, Alok Mishra, the producer, Naomi Grossman, who plays Janice, and just joining us over Zoom is David Marmor. He is the writer. He is the director. This is his vision made real. And we've been talking a lot about some of the stuff that's obvious about the movie, the background, where the ideas came from, the acquisition of talent. But it just as part of the reset, this is a movie about alienation and trying to find oneself, find one's place in the world, and then the independent spirit, how to develop it and what could make you lose that spirit? And you did a fantastic job with this, David. How does it
Thank
feel
you.
to see, not only to see this vision finally finished, but how does it feel to have people talking about it? Were you nervous before you put it out in the universe?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think anybody whoever sets out to make something is going to be nervous about how it's received. But in some way, I think what's been nice about this is that I think the expectations for it were relatively low. This was my first movie as my first feature as a director, and it was Alok and Shane's first feature as producers. It's a very small movie. We didn't have a lot of money or a lot of time, and so I think the expectations were fairly modest, and I think I would have just been happy to get through it, not make a total disaster. Maybe get into a couple film festivals and learn some lessons, which we all certainly did. Yeah, I mean, it's like the response has been way beyond what I had hoped for, or what I had realistically hoped for. Of course, when you're doing something like this, you are hoping it's going to be a masterpiece. But yeah, I think one of the big lessons of the movie was really had to do. It's a funny thing. Like Alok and Shane and I sort of came together. They liked the script. Alok knew one of my managers a little bit, but we really didn't know each other. We sort of went into it, with just sort of like mutual goodwill and hoping we were on the same page. But you don't really know what it's going to be like to work with someone until you start working with them. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We had some conflict, especially early on, as we're like getting to know each other, and in the pressure of pre-production and making the movie. But like, especially in post, I have come to appreciate these guys so much because they had such patience. We had a really slow post-production process for a number of reasons. Partly because my wife had a baby right after we finished shooting. Partly because we just didn't have any money, so we were getting favors for a lot of things, and that slows things down. But also partly just because this was everybody's first feature, and it took time for us to sort of try to get it right. And I know a lot of other producers would not have had the patience with that. They might have taken the movie away from me, which it would have been their right to do. But they didn't. They hung in there and gave me the time to come up with a cut, the time and the money, and frankly to hire a really good editor, and to come up with a cut that we were happy with, and then to put together a few days of reshoots, which just immeasurably helped the movie. Like you really kind of can't know exactly what you need in certain places until you see a cut of it. And especially on a movie like this, where we had 15 days initially, there's just not time to respond to problems, or like we had a location that didn't support the ending I'd originally written, so I hastily rewrote it, and we ended up with an ending that really wasn't that good. So that was one of the big things we did in the reshoots. And these guys just they were in it, and they were like, let's make this the best movie we can. Let's take the time and do it. And I think so much of the success is owed to that. I think it's that teamwork, between us, that we kind of believed in each other, and we hung in there through the long haul. And so that's one of the things that I've found sort of most gratifying about the experience. But of course, I mean, to go to Fantasia Fest in Montreal with a big chunk of the cast there, and to have the audiences respond as they did, and to, have those initial reviews come out. I'm always really nervous about reviews.
Sure.
It was, it felt great.
And speaking of the ending, without giving anything away, watching the ending, I just stared at my screen and said, shit.
Good. That's a good reaction. I like it.
that was it. We talked a lot about the background, so I don't necessarily want to repeat questions, although I'd love to ask you them, but we're going to move ahead a little bit. There are a lot of moments, they didn't linger, but a lot of moments that I kind of watched with my eyes through my fingers, some squirm-worthy moments. There was one scene involving a hammer and nails, and that was particularly uncomfortable. And I really have two questions spinning out of that. First, we're talking about a cult, which when you see someone with nails through the hands, you immediately think stigmata, which is religious.
Sure.
Intentional?
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously they're not an explicitly religious cult, but when I was looking for that moment, I knew I needed something really, really deeply horrifying there, and it was to accomplish a number of things. One of which was to just not to put too much of a dad joke into it, but to hammer home the stakes, the consequences, because a lot of the second half of the movie, there's not really any physical threat happening, right? It's a lot of psychological scenes, and I knew, even in the script writing stage, that we needed to really have gone through the horror of it with Sarah in order for those scenes to work, in order for us to feel the danger, even though there was not any immediate physical danger. So that was one thing. And then, the other part of it is that sequence is about them basically, sort of killing the old Sarah and resurrecting the new one. And so it felt appropriate. It's, it's an image that is very universal, whether or not you come from a Christian background, which I don't. It is something that's just in the culture, and it felt like an appropriate way to do it, especially given, sort of what you learn about the history of it, and the sort of universality of that particular experience for the people in the group. I think that, in my mind anyway, it was chosen at some point along in their history as something that would kind of speak to, many of the people who are joining the community who would have come from a kind of a Christian background.
It's interesting. One of the things we talked about before you joined us, David, is looking at Sarah from the perspective of, well, what would I do in that situation? And how would I respond? If I were there, how could I get out of this?
Yeah.
And that was one of those moments that crystallized the fact there's no getting out of this.
No, yeah. Yeah, that was one of the things that I, was really important to me all along, with that sequence specifically, was that I had this idea early on that I wanted it to be kind of the opposite of what you would expect in a horror movie scene, in that it's extremely brightly lit. It's almost blown out. And the idea is that there's nowhere for her to hide. Like, there's nothing in the room for her to use. There should not be any, it should really feel very hopeless to her, right? Like there's, they're watching her, there's cameras.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to set that up as sort of like this perfect cage that, where you would just say, like, I don't know how she's ever getting out of this.
This movie is so good. The movie is one bedroom. I monopolized a lot of your time. So before I let you go, I wanted to ask the follow-up question about the nail sequence. I tweeted about it, and I'm assuming it was you, Alok, who responded. There was a whole issue with blood in a shower, or
Well, they okay. The story is this, and by the way, I'm happy to stay on longer if you want to stay on longer.
Let's do it.
I think
I'm trying to be
will do
respectful.
it.
Naomi was
Hey, no,
nominated for an Emmy. I don't want to.
Emmy
I
nominee.
was gonna go to
I
I was gonna go get a trip to Barbados today, but then COVID happened, and I haven't left the house since.
Uh-huh.
Well, my point is that I think would be comfortable staying on longer. I feel like a lot of times when we're on, we always go over time, and we've gone over, like, we've done 2 hours before. Whatever's whatever. But I mean, Dave also needs to write, I know, too, as well. Anyway, so what was the question? Sorry, we were talking about
the blood in the shower.
Yeah. So what happened was that we did some of the movie was shot at my old house. Actually, I had this 100-year-old creepy craftsman house, and it was really awesome. But what we kind of noticed is the office of my house had the same flooring as the set that we shot on. Like, it had this weird wood floor that looked exactly like the set that we had shot on. And so all the stuff you see that's interior stuff, by the way, and it's giving something away, I'm sure, but it's all a set. That's all a set. There's the outside part from the apartment that we talked about earlier, but everything inside is like this a really amazing like Ricardo Jaton was our production designer. He set this one setup to be like everything you see inside, and it just so happened the floor looked like the office from my looked like a floor from my office, and so we went back and did reshoots. One thing we didn't see that we wanted to see was a really good close up on the nail going into the hand, and we had these really great like practical effect people because we wanted to do practical effects that came in, and unfortunately, like the bladder that's supposed to be on this part of the hand. Let's say this is a fake hand, and this is the I guess we're doing an audio thing, so I'm not explaining this right. But the back of a hand versus the front of a hand. Well, the back of the hand was where the bladder is supposed to be. Unfortunately, the front of the hand is where it actually was. So when you're nailing a hand into a wall and you have someone's hand against a wall, if it doesn't, hit the right spot, it's not spurting the way it is. And so there's a little bit of, VFX magic we had to do. But at some point, this is in my house upstairs in the one bathroom that we have, and they take this like arm that has the bladder and everything in it, and they take it into the bathroom because it's not working, and all of a sudden it just blows up like in the shower. And thank God the curtain was kind of closed, and just blood is like all over the place. It looked like we murdered somebody. We're trying to like do something in the bathtub, dismember them. That's what it looked like. And so my wife I also had a baby during this time period, right before we were going to shoot the reshoots. So I sent my poor wife and the baby and her parents away to my parents' house here in Los Angeles. And so she didn't come home until when she did come home, she came home and she looked at the show. She said, "What the fuck happened here?" I was like, it can all wash out, just FYI. Like it's like corn syrup, and they told me you can wash it, it'll come out. And she's like, you left it here? And I'm like, we didn't have a lot of time. So it was one of the things I forgot that I wanted to clean up before she came home, but she came home and she's like, "What the fuck is this? Who did you murder here, Mishra?" And I'm like, anyway, but it's very funny. It was not expected. It just actually happened. It was, what are you gonna do?
Hearing you all talk about how this all came together and just how scrappy you all were and how you dealt with adversity. I talked to a lot of musicians, and you always hear stories about how some of the best albums were recorded in no time flat, and the ones that kind of go off the rails are the ones that are overthought, year and a half in the studio. This feels very indie rock to me. I realize it's indie filmmaking, but there's something about that spirit that I really feel in talking to you all. I love this stuff. It's creative entrepreneurship.
It's true. I mean, if you watch the movie the next time, you gotta watch for Alok. He's in there several times. David's parents are in it. His pregnant wife is in it. My mom was almost in it because remember, she came for Christmas as well as the Emmys. And, she would have been in it, but she looked too much like Mrs. Stanhope, and it was going to be confusing if there were like too many, white-haired ladies wandering around. But it's truly like, in that regard, it's absolutely like this true labor of love. It's like this, where's Waldo? Like drink every time you see one of Alok's friends in the movie.
Well, David, I'm thrilled that you had the experiences you had in LA, which led to you writing this.
I'm not sure I am. But...
about that, by the way, Dave. Already, I went into your whole LA experience coming down.
Got it. Well, good. I'm glad I didn't have to relive it.
Because I mean, I'm from Chicago, so my perception of Los Angeles is very cutthroat. Every person for his or herself or themselves. It's a tough world to go into. Then on the other side of it, if there's ever a place that seems like a good breeding ground for cults or fringe group activity, it's that.
Oh yeah, I mean, it definitely is. Like so many of the famous ones were started in LA, and I don't think it's an accident. I don't exactly know why, but like I think it has to do with the kind of people that, LA is populated by transplants, and it's populated by people coming out on their own at a young age, and people who have a particular, artistic aspiration or dreams of stardom or whatever it is. And I think it's a lot of lonely people struggling, maybe not making it, and looking for something. And I think that, whether it be in music or movies or whatever, I think that makes it a really ideal breeding ground for these kind of groups. Which, by the way, I don't know if you guys got into this at all, but like, my own sort of theory after all the research I did on cults is that, like, almost, I don't think, anybody, or maybe very few of these groups start with any kind of malicious intent. Like, I think it's very few people who set out to sort of start a mind control cult. Like, so many of them started with really noble goals. And then, it's just something that it can turn the wrong way.
I mean, we talked about it. Alok and I talked about it earlier today on another podcast. But even like the Nazis really just wanted to fix the roads. Truly, like that's how it started.
I was talking about Edward Norton's character from American History X, and like how he talks such a good game in some of the monologues he gives. Gives that you're almost like, yeah, he's right. No, he's a fucking Nazi. Like, he's not. So this same cult does the same thing to lulling you into like they really want to do good for you. They're not like sexually abusing this girl. They're like, we want to make you as it goes along. But
right. Jerry believed that he was doing the right thing. Jerry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of them do. I think all of them really believe in what they're doing. And that was one of the things we talked about, in all the conversations I had with the cast members who were members of the community, is like, it was really important that they believe fully in the ethos of the community, and that they believe that they are the good guys, that what they are doing is truly trying to save Sarah.
Well, it's that old cliche or line that a villain is the hero of his or her own story.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good quote.
I love the movie. Again, it's 1BR. You can rent it VOD. I saw it on Amazon Prime. You can get it on Apple. Where else am I missing?
iTunes, Vudu, Fandango now, DirecTV, In Demand,
Google, I think,
Xbox,
as well.
PlayStation.
Google.
Sorry?
Google Play.
Google Play. Yeah.
So for those, if you're watching or listening and you need further prodding, which how could you at this point? If you like movies like Rosemary's Baby or Midsummer or The Invitation, we were talking about this earlier, where you see a recognizable world that just suddenly it goes south. Very familiar settings and normal everyday people, and you see people's inhumanity to other people just kind of explode. I love this kind of stuff. It struck all the right chords with me. Can't recommend it enough. Go rent it. We're all looking for content, which, by the way, thank you for putting content out in the world when we are so starved for it. Oh, wait, what's the cat's name, David?
Toshi.
Toshi.
Yeah.
Who's a good cat?
Yeah, he's a good cat.
No
oven for you.
He's the cat lover, and like the whole thing of it was what's the worst thing in my sort of like what's the worst thing that happened to this cat, and he came up with it, and then like he wanted to crucify the cat at first, and I was even like, and I don't, I'm a dog person, but like I was like, yeah, usually I don't care, but I was like, we can't do that, we can't crucify the cat, and then as it went along further in the discussion, we were like, can we? He put the cat in the oven, and I was like, I wanted to see the cat like shoot out of the oven on fire, its eye like burst or something crazier. And it was a part in our focus groups. We were like, all right, who wants to see more? And only 75% of the people didn't want to see it. 25% of the people did want to see it, but it was really the hardcore horror fans.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter, it's not a hardcore horror movie. It's a psychological thriller / like with horror elements. And so like I was very for having more cat. It would have cost us more money in addition, which then I wasn't a fan of, but because I'm a money grubbing producer, is like David likes to say all the time. But I realized that I would not win that argument, and I was kind of almost glad that the audience sort of disagreed with me, and so we didn't have to spend any more money. And so we didn't do anything but kind of actually even more try to shield what people were seeing. Because weirdly, that's the one thing that people really have a problem with, is sort of like, animal or cat death.
Oh, yeah.
And, you can kill 5 people in a movie, which happens, right? In horrible ways. Kill 1 cat.
I have a hard time. I can watch all kinds of horrible, grisly deaths in movies. When it comes to animals and kids, I can't. it really has a visceral reaction.
Well, I was thankful that we kept at least as much of the cat as we did, because it gives me a chance to make hot pussy jokes in every podcast possible.
Yes.
It's like my go-to.
Oh, thank you.
If I don't get it in, then I failed. So now we can say goodbye.
Now we can move on. Yeah.
I have nowhere to go from there. So David, the obvious question, after I saw the end and said, shit, it was clear to me that we could revisit this world.
Yeah.
Is that something you're working on?
Not actively. It's one of these things where it's not kind of up to us. It's sort of a question of whether, sorry, Toshi is dominating here. All right, that's enough, buddy. Come on. It's a question of whether, of how the movie does. If our distributor or somebody else sort of came back to us and said, we think there's an audience for another one. There are places we could take the story. Alok and I have talked it over a little bit, and I certainly have ideas for both sort of carrying Sarah's story forward, and also, I think there's a lot that I would find interesting anyway about sort of the history of the community and where it came from.
And we need more Janice. Let's be honest. We need more Janice.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We didn't get it in the reshoots, by the way.
1BR Chronicles : Janice. I have said it before.
Why don't we shoot it in Barbados?
If
that
only.
way we all win.
That's where you end up. That's where you end up when you don't do right by the cult, is really Barbados. But yeah, the thing of it though is that I think that there are a lot of interesting ideas that could be out there that, we're I should also put this out there too, is that we're working on another movie that's gonna with another guy, Marcel Sarmiento, who did Dead Girl, and that's what we're gonna do next. It's like a more of a $5 million hopefully production in that regard. But then the next movie we're doing after that is hopefully with David Marmor, because we want to work with him again, of course. We want to get the band back together. We actually had a great time working on this, so we understand each other. He talked about patience earlier. Two-way street, absolutely the same way. Respect to him. And so the thing of it is that I'm not going to tell you what it's about at all, but just so you know, we're kind of JJ Abramsing the shit out of this. It's an even better, cooler movie than 1BR. I promise you. I can just say that with not feeling one iota of remorse or any kind of hesitation. I want to say
sold.
It's going to be even cooler. And yes, and we can't wait to do it. It's going to be bigger budget, obviously, because David needs to get up there and start directing these big things, and he deserves it because he's a visionary. And so, hopefully Janice will pop in it somewhere, but not as Janice. Naomi Grossman, always Naomi Grossman. Coming back to it, a lot of actors, a lot of directors like Tarantino work with the same actors again and again, because they're almost like, and even James Cameron with different people he worked with. They're the good luck talismans in some way, I feel. So we'll see. But excited to work with him again. And if we get to the point where we find a really, we're formulating ideas for, a 1BR 2-bathroom movie, but we don't know where it's going to go yet, but we've had some talks. So that's at least interesting. I mean, we'll see it with the public demand, the public gets, I want to say. That's sort of what it is. So if people go out and rent this on VOD like crazy, there is a real legitimate case to be made to make this sooner than later sometimes, because you always see this thing where people make movies that now people don't remember 10 years later, and what's the point of this, right? Why not make it much sooner if you can? That's my point. So anyway,
well, I love it. It's a perfect way to spend a night. I love this type of horror movie. You nailed it, David. The script and directing, absolutely fantastic. I was all in pretty much from the get-go. And I was saying earlier, you see her show up in the complex and you see how communal everything is, and smiles, and there's the handsome dude next door, and you're just waiting for that shoe to drop, and when it drops really fucking hard. It's just everything blows up. So I'm going to kill the Facebook Live feed. Thank you everybody who's been watching, much appreciated.